Right, good afternoon everybody. Thanks very much for attending this webinar. Sorry you can't see me just now, but maybe that's a good thing as well. So just some housekeeping first of all. If everybody can mute themselves, it'll just make for a much smoother experience, and it means that there won't be a lot of feedback and stuff like that when the speakers start to speak. This webinar is going to be recorded, so if you don't want to be recorded or you don't want your camera on, if you can switch that off. The video recording will be available on the EIS website and possibly shared on Facebook as well. So if you don't want to be shared, which is totally fine, just switch your video sharing off just now. I'm just going to quickly run through the outline of the hour so that you know what's coming up. So there's going to be 3 speakers. The first speaker is going to be Kat Telford, and she's going to be talking about the approach Stonewall's been taking and a little bit about Section 28 as well. Our second speaker is Marzana Portsogoselska from Poland, and she's going to be talking about some of the things that are happening with LGBT equality in schools over in Poland. And then our third speaker today is going to be Jordan Daly from the Thai Campaign. After these 3 speakers have shared what they've got to share, we're then going to move on to a question and answer session. So if you want to send some questions through via the chat mechanism on this web app, then Selma will select some of the questions and then we'll try and respond to them at the end. If you would like to speak, if you would like to ask your own question, we'll give you that option at the end, but send it through to Selma first as the event is going through on the hour. So yeah, I'm just very quickly to introduce myself. My name's David Dick. I'm the convener of the LGBT Equality Committee, and we're doing this event today to try and mark something for Pride Month. Obviously with coronavirus, everything's a wee bit different. We do have a social media action today as well, which we'll explain at the end, but it's basically to try and take a selfie of yourself with the resources that are on the EIS website or on their Twitter feed, to take a photo of how you take pride in teaching. So just a wee selfie and link it into the EIS Twitter handle, and to explain kind of how we're going to try and keep LGBT education on the agenda going forward, because coronavirus is obviously going to dominate so many things. So we need to be aware that, you know, the great progressive work that is taking place doesn't kind of fall behind. So just quickly before we get started, in terms of being in a union, in terms of, you know, being an activist, I think today it is important that we mark the sort of 3 main areas that are in the headlines just now. So the first is some solidarity with the Gender Recognition Act reforms, which are seen to be coming into problems down with Boris Johnson and stuff like that. So we need to reaffirm our commitment and our solidarity with all our trans siblings to ensure that we sail these stormy waters, because they are going to be stormy waters coming up. The second point is solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, which is taking place across the world. And thirdly, we should be aware and cognisant of LGBTQ people who are at home just now because of coronavirus, and how the home is not necessarily the safest place for people like that, and they may be vulnerable. And also for LGBTQ people who are living alone, and you know, the sort of isolation and the mental health issues that coronavirus may bring. So it's great that there's so many people here today. Thank you all for taking the time to join in with us today. And I hope there's plenty of food for thought. And if you've got any questions, please send them through during the webinar to Selma. Okay, doke. So we're going to move on now to our first speaker. So 2 seconds. So our first speaker today is going to be Kat Telford. Kat is the Empowerment Programmes Officer with Stonewall Scotland, and she's involved with Stonewall's education work with teachers and education bodies. Before beginning work with Stonewall 5 years ago, they had been studying for the PGDE, but became more interested in the pastoral side of education, which led them to taking the current role which they're able to do to create a more LGBTI inclusive environment for young people. So I will hand you over to Kat.
Thank you very much, David. Just to check, Selma especially, because I can see you in my camera at the moment, can you wave to show if you can hear me? Fab, brilliant, thank you. Sorry, it's always one of those things that you just want to check on these things. So thank you so much to the EIS team for having me along to today, and thank you as well for hosting this event, because I think it's really vital, especially during a time when we're all suddenly facing a isolation that we've maybe not encountered before in our lives, that we can still find spaces to come together and to talk about the things that concern us and celebrate and keep our community bonds going. Like, I'm sure, though, we're going to temper that a little bit by acknowledging that it's been 3 months and we're all a bit sick of like live webcam calls and Zoom calls, and that's okay. I always find it amusing because when I think back to myself when I was 14 and I spent all my life living on MSN Live and things like that, if you told me back then that I would be doing this kind of thing all the time, I'd have probably thought it was bloody brilliant. Couldn't wait for it, like pandemic and all of that aside. And when I think about what I used to do when I was younger, and I look back at my teenage years in school, so I went to school in 2002 and I left in 2007. I was in school for 1 year before legislation was changed in England and Wales, and Section 28 got repealed. In Scotland, the legislation was repealed in 2000. But when I came to university in Scotland, I went to Uni of Glasgow, and I was chatting with folks who are LGBTQ in my age. We all spoke about our experiences of being young and LGBT people, and not one of us seemed to have seen like positive representation of LGBT voices in mainstream media or had had LGBT issues discussed in school. And we've all had experiences when we talked about it, about bullying that took place because we were LGBT, and not a lot of positive outcomes happening if we bothered to report it, or feeling like we weren't supported. And the reasons why we, as young people, went through school in the early 2000s, still experiencing a lot of this homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, was because the repeal of Section 28 happened, but there was still a hangover from it. And the video that you're about to see, I kind of got a sneak peek because Selma sent me it to have a look beforehand. It's really great. You're going to really enjoy it. But the video talks about this impact of the legislation and the fact that essentially Section 28 made it criminal to promote homosexuality in schools. But what this life effect had was that it meant that teachers couldn't talk about it. There was a possibility you would lose your job. You couldn't be seen to have any kind of positive affirmations of LGBT identities within any kind of public services. And the thing is if you don't see positive representations, if you don't get to talk about it, if it's seen as a big taboo, that creates an undercurrent of ideas that there's something wrong, or that there's something secret, or it's a little bit shady, and not in the current way that we seem to use shade. Like, it becomes shameful. And it's further amplified through things like, in the video, there's a survey mentioned where the speaker talks about the fact that 79% of participants in that sample said that it was either mostly or always wrong to be gay. And you can't just get rid of those ideas and civil attitudes with the change of legislation. Changing the legislation is super important. And it does mean that you can then create change from that because you've got that as a sort of foundation. But the real change has come about in the last 20 years, where we got the repeal made and then activists were able to put in the hard graft and start seeing those positive changes in civil society. And while civil society has seen a shift in recent years towards a more positive attitude in the mainstream around gay and lesbian identities, not saying it's perfect, but it's still a shift, we still need to ensure that we continue the work to support those LGBTQ plus identities that aren't seen to be as mainstream acceptable. I'm talking about identities such as bi plus identities, or if you're Black and LGBTQ, or disabled and LGBTQ, if you're trans, if you're non-binary, if you're ace, if you're LGBTQ and you've even got a faith, you still face a lot of discrimination, both from within the community and outwith. And so while we've done quite a lot in the last 20 years, it's exciting to see what we can do in the future. And we need to look at how we can support our LGBT young people to keep being the activists that we need them to be to keep on this great work. You know, and that might be doing like huge things, like convincing them that it's a great thing to abseil into the House of Lords and doing all this kind of crazy stuff that you hear about. Or it could just be the small things, like a teacher who checks out for bullying that's taking place and keeps an eye on it and addresses it. Or it could be the teacher that covers their entire corridor in pictures of rainbows and LGBT pride colours. Special shout out there to Dawn Wilson, who worked at Vale Leven Academy when I was doing my PGDE. Or it could even be like a librarian who makes sure that there's LGBT books on the shelves, or a janitor who wears rainbow laces in their shoes. Like, they're all such small ways, but they're all significant. And so what I encourage is, let's learn from the activists that came before us, and let's keep making sure that our young people are encouraged to do that activism in the future, because we need them to. And it's going to be awesome to watch them flourish and become that change. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kat. That's great. We're going to play the clip now of Section 28. Okay, thanks so much, Kat. I think we finally got the video working there. So thanks, Selma. I'm aware that it's now 12:30, so we're going to move quite quickly on to our second speaker, who is Marzana Pogorzelska. We're going to watch another video very quickly about to set the sort of scene in Poland, where there is an increasing foment of a rollback of LGBT equality and rights, and a normalisation of discriminatory language and sort of behaviours by the political parties that are over in Poland just now. So the next clip is going to give us a wee insight into that, and then Marzana is going to speak. So Marzana is the Research Associate at the Institute of English at the Opole University. She's interested in human rights, intercultural, gender and critical pedagogy. She's the Polish recipient of the Irina Sendler Award for Repairing the World, as well as European Awards for promoting LGBT rights in education. She's also a member of the ZNP, the Union of Polish Teachers, which is the largest trade union for teachers in Poland. So we welcome Marzana today, and we're going to watch the video about Poland first. Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm now going to introduce Marzana to come and speak. Okay, thanks, Marzana.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for inviting me. And I have two extreme feelings listening to you and being with you. On one hand, I'm very, very happy because I know what you celebrate. But on the other hand, it makes me very, very unhappy because I can also see, when I look at the situation where you are now, I know it's not ideal, but you are so far away from us, and we are in Poland making a big, big step back. And can I ask for my presentation? So I will start speaking, and the presentation probably will appear in the meantime. So as I said, we are making a big, big step back in Poland. You all probably know what is happening, and the film that you just saw was I think it was made a few months ago or last year, but now the situation is even worse. And this situation that we have now is it did not start overnight. It was the process, and it was many years process. And if I could, because I was asked to tell you about the reasons, so they are very complex. Of course, I would say, after the war from 1945 to 1989, we were in Poland under the pressure of two powerful institutions, the communist state and the Catholic Church. So over 90% of people identify themselves as Catholics. So these two institutions during communism were totally different, but they were very similar in one aspect: repression of sexuality and homosexuality. So through all these years, the homosexuality was taboo, and it was not publicly spoken about. And if it was in negative, with negative associations. And later on, in 1989, the communism fell down, and we started living in democracy. And a lot of minorities came out, and the process of their visibility started. But we also had a kind of comeback to so-called traditional values. So people started to ask themselves, what does it mean to be Polish if we are not anymore the West and the East? We are Polish, we have our traditions, and what does it mean to be Polish? It means to be a Catholic, to be a traditional, to believe in traditional families, etc. So all this strengthened homophobia, and we also, when we were accessing European Union, next slide please, in 2004, we had the outburst of homophobia because homosexuality was presented as a threat to traditional family, something that European Union will try to impose. And today we still have very, very close relations between state and church, and it very much affects the LGBT rights. And next slide, please. And it's going, right? I think next slide. And when we talk about schools, the context that we are all interested in, a slide before. So that we have a very high level of violence. A slide before, please. Violence against LGBT people, LGBT plus people at school, and these are the effects of this violence. But it's also important that this violence is not addressed. I mean, all the research that we know was commissioned not by the Ministry of Education, never, but by universities or NGOs. Can I ask next slide? Yes, I think I was talking about that, but this percentage of LGBT teenagers feeling lonely, isolated, with suicidal thoughts is sometimes bigger, higher than average. And when we talk about today, LGBT is used as LGBT rights are used as a weapon in political fight. We have at the moment the presidential campaign, and something which is called institutional homophobia is experienced by a lot of LGBT people, and they are not only them, their friends, their families. As you've probably heard, 1/3 of our country was declared by the local government ideology-free zones. What does it mean? It means that in these municipalities, people decided, or the authorities decided, that there shouldn't be teaching about LGBT rights at schools. I mean, this teaching does not exist, but if somebody tried, then it would be even more difficult now. And of course, you probably understand why LGBT is connected with the word ideology. Ideology we associate it with some unwanted influence, sometimes secret. And in Poland, when we hear ideology, it resonates with communist ideology. So that is the strategy that is used just to cause disgust to LGBT people. And it's not the first time when we talk about education and institutional homophobia. It's not the first time when it's happening, because we had the period between 2005 and 2007 when first time homophobia was officially promoted by educational authorities. And today the situation is even worse. You can hear the opinions like the one expressed by the educational board. Activities aimed at LGBT rights are promoting pedophilia. Sex education is a threat to traditional values, and that is all expressed by educational authorities. Can you see the next slide? Oh yes, or it's just me. And these days, just a week ago, the person who is running for president and the current president, he started this anti-LGBT thread in his campaign. He said, the next slide please, he said exactly that LGBT people, the LGBT is not people, it's ideology. Now he says it was out of context. It is not. That is what he said. And then other politicians started to say the same things. Poland without LGBT would be more beautiful. We don't need these people are not normal. And when we talk about schools and teachers, you can guess that their situation is extremely difficult, but it always depends on school management. If school management is somehow LGBT friendly, the teachers can do some actions, or maybe not campaigns, but actions for LGBT rights. They must always be afraid of parents' pressure, because the mainstream approach is silence about these issues or pathologizing attitude, very often expressed by teachers themselves at schools. Next, please. Still, there are, please, next slide, because it goes very slowly, so I can already say next. If there is any resistance, it goes from NGOs. So it's NGOs like Lambda, like Campaign Against Homophobia, who organize campaigns and distribute leaflets, books, and do the research. And they also encourage schools to organize Rainbow Friday. It is organized, not in many schools, but still, the reception is from hostility and attacks to some schools and students who are very happy, next slide please, who are very happy to be able to organize it and to show their support. And to, at the end, what I can say to summarize the situation, I was a teacher, I'm still a teacher at university. I know that the climate of hatred, I know that the hate speech that is present in mainstream will increase the homophobic violence. And that is tragic. And some people say that these politicians today have blood on their hands, and I do agree. And what we do need international support, governmental and non-governmental. And it's going, it's flowing, but still teachers very often feel lonely. And especially in small cities, in villages, they feel they are the only one who believe in LGBT rights. Thank you very much.
Marzana, thanks very much. That was a fascinating insight, and I wanted to hear a lot more about that. I think
Thank
the way
you.
that it was that you framed it, in its historical and political context, is definitely a warning for us all. In Scotland and in Britain, where there is a drift towards rightwards, and there is, social media can sort of unleash, for all that it can bring people together and connect people across. It also, unleashes a lot of rhetoric, which can be very, very harmful. And I think we should all be aware of what has happened in Poland and how it's been politicised, and the effect that that's had. That's been a stark warning for us all today. So thanks very much for sharing that with us. We're going to move on now to Jordan Daly from the TIE campaign, who's going to do our last presentation before we move on to the Q&A. So just a wee reminder, if you do have any questions, use the chat function to send to Selma, and probably by the time it gets to 1 o'clock, I'll need to say goodbye because I'm going back on the floor at this childcare hub. So Selma will do the question and answer session at the end. Okay, so just to introduce Jordan, he's the co-founder of the TIE campaign, which stands for Time for Inclusive Education. It's a volunteer charity and campaigning group which successfully campaigned for LGBT+ inclusive education to be implemented in Scotland, a world first in 2018. TIE deliver input to primary and secondary schools across the country, host teacher training seminars, and develop LGBT inclusive educational resources for schools, all of which is free. So we're delighted to have Jordan today to finish off our session for us today. So I'll pass over to Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and thanks for having us again today. I've been looking at some of the participants in the session, and I can see a lot of friends, a lot of teachers that we've worked with before, so it's really nice actually to see all of you again. I'm actually just going to do the same that Kat done, and I'm actually looking specifically at you, Kat, so if you can hear me, can you just wave? Perfect, great. All right, so I just want to start as well by thanking Marzana for sharing the situation in Poland, and I will speak just as an organisation on LGBT education here in Scotland, and I'm sure that I'll echo the sentiments of many of the teachers that are on the call if there is anything that any of us can do in terms of highlighting the situation or showing solidarity, or if there's anything that you need us at all to do, please do reach out. We're very, very happy to help. And it actually provides good context just for kicking off the little session that I'm going to try and finish before 1, but if I take us over by a few minutes, I do apologise. I wanted to just start by drawing your attention to some research which was published last year in the United States, which for the first time considered the public health consequences of media-driven public campaigns around minority rights, which risk promoting stigma. Throughout the call, we've heard different examples of this, whether that's the situation that's happening in Poland, whether that's the current UK conversation around the reform of the Gender Recognition Act, and I'm sure many of us know how toxic that conversation has been. But this research looked at the rates of homophobic bullying throughout the duration of the Proposition 8 public debate, which happened in California, and this was a 2008 referendum which restricted marriage to heterosexuals in California. It was eventually overturned, but again, that was a very, very toxic debate, and what the researchers found was that homophobic bullying in schools had increased during the duration of the debate and then immediately decreased once the debate had concluded. And Stephen Russell, who was the chair of the Human Development and Family Sciences Department at the University of Texas, who led on the research, had said, quote, "We think that young people don't hear what adults and lawmakers are talking about, but they do. Policies and campaigns related to Black Lives Matter, bathroom bills, immigration, LGBT rights, these can be concerning in how they affect the health and well-being of our youth. The public health consequences of these very contentious and media-driven discussions are more important than we knew." So when we're talking about LGBT education, it's important to keep in mind the wider context of what is actually going on and the role that we certainly have as a volunteer non-governmental organisation and charity, but also that you have as educators, because our young people are watching this, they're seeing this, and they're on the same social media platforms that we are all on. So I just wanted to kind of begin by framing the discussion in that way. So in terms of TIE, I'm sure many of you will have either worked with us before or know who we are. But we work specifically on LGBT inclusive education, and 2 years ago in 2018, the Scottish Government accepted 33 recommendations in full, which meant that Scotland at that point became the first country in the world to agree to embed LGBT inclusive education in public schools. Next slide, please. Our campaign had been running since 2015, and that whole time we've always been a volunteer organisation. And this report is available online that any of you can read. Next slide, please. You might have seen an article over the last week or two which had highlighted that Scotland has become the first country in the world to include LGBT history in the curriculum. That is actually referring to the exact same proposals that were accepted in 2018. The newspaper that ran it had just picked it up from a viral Instagram post, so they were 2 years late, and they also didn't actually mention that it's not just LGBT history, so don't worry, history teachers, it's not all falling on your shoulders. But LGBT inclusive education is effectively a broad umbrella term, which includes, yes, LGBT history, including LGBT people across the curriculum, but it also includes education around equality, the Equality Act, discrimination, prejudice-based bullying, gender stereotypes, relationships, families, diversity, and more. In terms of the actual recommendations that have been accepted, it works effectively as a pyramid, and I've not got enough time to go through this completely, but what you're seeing on your screen here, and the first two tiers of your pyramid, is effectively your national framework. So the relationship, sexual health and parenthood guidance is being updated, and for the first time there are statutory outcomes included in that guidance which relate to LGBT. There are also going to be changes made to the curriculum in terms of some specific LGBT E's and O's, and also the SQA are going to be including LGBT content across different course specifications. But we're not going to leave teachers to just try and figure out how to actually meet all of these outcomes on their own. So there is a suite of resources being developed. There will be CLPL, which will be available for free. There's also going to be changes to LGBT inclusion within ITE, and to kind of include it all off, there will be school inspections. So if I could just skip the next slide and go straight on to the one after that. So the national implementation is for 2021. As things stand, that is still going ahead. There's been no, official or confirmed delay to that. We are still volunteering on the policy. In fact, throughout lockdown, we've been doing quite a lot of work in terms of getting this policy completed. We are currently scoping which resources need to be developed. We're doing some of that development, and we're getting briefs and proposals around ITE and CLPL over. But I just want to talk about practically what can you do during lockdown. So I'm going to just very quickly discuss two resources that are available for you now for free. The first one is our Icons 2020 resource. Some of you might be aware of this, you might have already used it in your classroom. But this resource, for those who aren't aware, and I'm conscious that this is being recorded, so it may be watched by others, it's effectively a very easy to read, very easy to understand resource, which includes well-known LGBT people, LGBT historical figures, lesser known LGBT people who have really made an impact. And each of the people in this resource have been included because they specifically fit within the E's and O's of Curriculum for Excellence. The resource includes lesson ideas. It also includes an infographics pack that when you put it all together, you'll have a visual educational rainbow flag display. Next slide, please. And next slide again. So this is what some of the graphics look like. Next slide. In terms of lockdown, what we have seen some schools doing and what we are encouraging schools to do is to think about how this resource could be used creatively in lockdown. Next slide, please. So the way that it's been used prior, when schools were up and running, was that you would see things like this from Stenhousemuir Primary School, which is your visual educational display on the wall. Next slide, please. Or you would see displays like this, which we've got here, Whitehill Secondary School and Barhead High School. Again, your educational displays. Next slide, please. But what we are encouraging you to try and think about is how can you take this resource and use it in an online way. So we've seen lots of these Bitmoji Google Slide virtual classrooms. It's Pride Month just now. This is Hazelhead Academy, who have used the resource to look at, you can see here our person of the week is Marsha P. Johnson. If you click on that, it will take you into information about Marsha. If you click on the TIE poster, it will take you to the TIE website. We've seen other schools, including some of the TIE resources or LGBT-friendly books on the bookshelf. So if you click on them, it takes you there. We have seen other schools setting some activities around important dates in June. So we've got obviously the 28th of June is the anniversary of Stonewall Uprising. It's also the anniversary of TIE being founded, which was an accidental happy coincidence. But today actually is the 20th anniversary of the very first Pride March in Scotland. And there are lots of different things that we can do through Pride Month, but also throughout the year in terms of how do we engage young people online and help boost their knowledge of some of the key people from LGBT history and provide them role models, but also educate young people who aren't LGBT about the contributions of the community. Next slide, please. The lesson ideas that are in the ICON resource, they are adaptable depending on what you're currently doing on lockdown. So you can see here health and wellbeing PSE. We've got content here which we propose around gender stereotypes, understanding bias. There's a couple of video links in there to information about Sari Ride, who was the first American woman and the first known gay or lesbian person to travel to space. There's information here around Larry Kramer and his play The Normal Heart. We've got information around World War II, Alan Turing and Hans Scholl. Next slide. And we also have information which looks specifically at this geography lesson ideas of the role of campaigners like Lady Phil and Kasha Nabagisara. Kasha, who founded a Ugandan LGBT activist group that campaigned against the anti-homosexuality bill in Uganda. And what we propose is that young people look at the international context around LGBT rights. What role did Britain play, the British Empire, in colonialism and exporting anti-sodomy laws across former Commonwealth nations? But this would also tie in perfectly with what has just been discussed about the context in Poland when we're in Pride Month. Let's take a look at what's happening internationally. Let's look at Scotland and let's ask those probing questions. Do we have a duty to support NGO activists in other parts of the world, particularly former Commonwealth nations, where our country does play a responsibility? And then our history lesson idea here is around the Stonewall Uprising, looking specifically at Storm Larvery and Marsha P. Johnson. On our website too, we also do have a podcast, which is designed for teachers and young people, and we do very in-depth profiles of LGBT history. So we've got a podcast which looks at the life of Storm Larvery. We have a podcast which looks specifically, 3-part episode at the repeal of Section 28 in Scotland. We spoke to people someone who was there at the time, who shared first-hand testimony and eyewitness experience. And these are all things that you can engage young people in during lockdown. Next slide. And specifically for primary schools, at the beginning of lockdown, we released this free resource. It's an e-learning activity for young people. It's designed specifically for teachers, but also parents who are homeschooling. It was created by Liam Stevenson, who's the co-founder of TIE. He is the parent of an 8-year-old himself, and at the start of the pandemic, he explains this in the foreword to the resource. At the start of the pandemic, his 8-year-old daughter had told him that this was the coronavirus situation was the fault of Chinese people. And Liam was quite taken aback by that and had asked if she understood what discrimination and racism were, and she said that she didn't. She didn't understand why that was, not a very nice comment to make. And so he actually just put some of the content of this resource together just as a parent trying to homeschool his own daughter. But we've turned it into a comprehensive educational resource for primary school teachers, and it looks specifically at what does the word discrimination mean. There are examples in there included around racism, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, and it is designed to be understood effectively by primary school pupils. Massive shout out to Lauren Moultrie and Scott Mowat, who supported the development of this resource, in case they're watching this. But it's been taken up really well by primary schools so far. We've had a lot of great feedback. And this is just a pretty good activity that a young person can go away and do on their own, and it really helps them understand some of those bigger current national conversations that are happening. Next slide. And so this here was from Gowramere Primary School. They uploaded onto their Twitter just some of the work that the young people had submitted once they had completed this resource. And what I do just want to finish on here from the words of a primary school pupil, once they worked their way through the resource, they had pointed out that how does discrimination impact people? Well, they've said that some people might be scared, but they've also pointed out, just at the end of their summary, you should always treat others the same as you want to be treated yourself, and you should challenge discrimination. And they have said, something about education that I really wanted to smoothly finish on because it was the perfect quote, and now I can't find it. Right, it's in there somewhere, but they basically pointed out the importance of, I'm trying to squint to see it on the screen, I've got bad enough eyes as that is, but they pointed out the importance of being educated about understanding the experiences of different communities, about understanding the impact of discrimination, and, you know, it's the words of our bairns. So I hope that was a useful little session. All of these resources are available for free on our website. Most of you should know how to contact us, but if you don't, next slide please. You can get in touch with us directly. We're on lockdown as well. We are working in our own jobs at the same time, but we've had a lot of conversations over the last little while just with teachers trying to adapt the resources to work through lockdown. And we are always happy to help in terms of supporting you to try and implement some of this through lockdown. Or if you do go away and do any of this work, please let us know, because it's always helpful to share good practice with other teachers. So thank you very much, and I will pop off now.
Thanks so much, Jordan, for that really interesting presentation, which ties in quite well to some of the questions that have been coming in about how we keep focus switched on for LGBT inclusive education during this crisis and not make equality drop off when there are other competing issues going on. Unfortunately, we have run out of time today for questions, but what we're going to do is we'll collate the questions that we have and do a write-up, and the speakers will have input on that as well. So they're not going to go missing, and I apologize again for the tech issues that we were having in the beginning. I just wanted to say thank you so much to Kat, Marzana and Jordan for contributing to this event. And actually, we've just been made aware that there's a protest today outside the Polish consulate for LGBT rights. So you might see something about that on Twitter. Or if you're in Edinburgh and fancy running over, it starts in about 7 minutes, so you will have to be very conveniently located to make that. But yeah, we have to find different ways to show up for each other in these times where in some places in the world, more than others, LGBT rights are under threat. So thanks again so much to all speakers. If I could have the next slide, or the last slide rather, that explains our social media action that we encourage you to take part in. If you would like to share some of the ways that you put LGBT equality into practice in your work, or just show us how you take pride in teaching, you can download our poster, you can print it out, or you can put it on your phone and take a selfie, put it on social media, just as a way to raise awareness of Pride's relevance today, even during a pandemic, and for LGBT equality. So you can download this from the website, and you can also see it will be tweeted by the EIS Union account, so you can retweet it from there. So thanks so much to all speakers, and thanks for coming today. You can clap if you unmute yourself, or we can clap at the same time and say Happy Pride.
Yay!
Yay! Big Pride! Happy Pride, everyone!